Okay. Well, let's do the 1 minute meditation again without the 8 minute introduction. Uh, so settle yourself into meditation posture, especially straighten your spine and refresh your motivation. What brought you here today, this weekend, the whole retreat, if you attended the whole thing? Why? And then some sense of refuge in, it's nice being surrounded by Sangha, people interested in the same path or similar path. So taking refuge in our Dharma brothers and sisters, as we call them, and then the greater sphere of everybody we know, strangers, enemies, even their capacity for good, their healthy needs, and the sometimes unhealthy strategies they take in meeting those needs. But underneath fundamental goodness, underlying everybody, to take refuge in that, our capacity for good, and whatever else you take refuge in. And then just bring your mind to your breath just for 1 minute. We'll focus to stabilize our minds. Then you can come out of the meditation. I wanted to tell you something. Um, when I got invited to start leading meditations like 18 years ago, I asked all my teachers, first of all, should I do it? And then how? And one thing Venerable Renee told me was if you watch His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he gives a talk, whenever he sits down, he snaps. I don't know if anyone has ever seen that. Look for it the next time you watch him. And what that is, it's to remind you of impermanence, to remind you like, oh, it's a to counteract any ego you might have when giving a lecture, people listening to you. Well, my life's going to end. All this is impermanent. My reputation, everything, it rises and falls. So if you ever see His Holiness or some teacher snap like that, it's usually that's what it means. That's what I was told that it means. I try to do that when I remember too. Oh yeah, yeah. So that's what that. Had you ever heard that before? Oh yeah, that's what I was taught. Maybe it means other things too. So now we're on this topic of renunciation. It kind of never fails to sort of amuse me how kind of bad the translations are for every topic, and this one is almost no exception. Renunciation. Um, some traditions call it the determination to be free. I like that a lot. That's more, I mean, in general, it's kind of better to say what you're going towards rather than away, kind of healthy for your mind. So the determination to be free, although, yeah, free of something. Um, I've also heard it described, I kind of puzzled it out myself because someone was saying, where does self-compassion fit on the lamrim? And, the way that I studied it, like Lama Tsongkhapa, it's not really named explicitly, self-compassion in the lamrim. So I kind of just went through my mind thinking, each topic, I said, oh, it's renunciation, it's self-compassion, because that's where you really start to give up the causes of suffering and cultivate the real causes of happiness. Not like the earlier ones aren't, but this is the turning point. Like this is the axis where you have this extraordinary courage to face head on, what's really making me miserable and what's going to bring me happiness. And I asked some other teachers too. I asked Venerable Sangye Khadro, Lauren Ladner. They all said the same thing. They said, "Yeah, self-compassion. It's in renunciation." So I really think that's, in some ways, that's what this topic should be called. I think that's the best explanation for it. How do you actually have compassion for yourself? What does that mean? There's a lot of ways, but this is probably the place where it really starts. So you can say this is a topic where, like, the rubber meets the road, as they say, um, in our era of the vehicle. Um, I in the book I use the matrix as a metaphor, and I call this topic, the red pill of renunciation. The Matrix is, how many people have seen this movie? It is so long ago now. It's like 26 years ago it came out. So I have to actually explain it in the book. There's some people reading it haven't seen it. And it's very violent. We were talking about violence, but it's very, very deep philosophically too. It's a great movie because I've seen people write like PhD theses about the Matrix on how it relates to Gnostic Christianity and many other aspects of philosophy and religion. They really tapped into a lot, the Wachowskis. Um, but in this case, a lot of people talk about the matrix in terms of emptiness. But I like to talk about it in terms of renunciation, because that red pill is that choice of the red pill and the blue pill. Did anybody not seen the movie? Okay. So in the Matrix, there's this guy, Neo, played by Keanu Reeves. And he he's like a hacker in this kind of dull corporate world, and he starts to get some hints that the world isn't as it seems, and eventually he gets offered by this group of kind of undercover, sort of leather wearing, cool, um, violent hackers, a red pill or a blue pill, and they say, take the blue pill and you can go back, forget all of this, and just go back to your normal world. Take the red pill and we'll show you what reality really is. And do you want me to spoil the movie for you and tell you what the red pill is? Okay. Well, you take the red pill and you find out that all of the reality that they had thought reality is actually a giant VR simulation of robot overlords who have everybody's actual physical body operating as a battery to power those robots. And so when you take the red pill, he gets ejected and gets into his physical body, and then they try to, have a revolution and free all the enslaved humanity. Anyway, I think that it's a good metaphor for renunciation because it's scary. It's actually scary. And what you're doing is wanting to face reality as it is, acknowledging that most of the suffering we experience is rooted in our minds. And it doesn't mean you imagine you're suffering, but that we continue to blame and project our problems onto the outer world. It's that attitude. And most of the people here are very committed Buddhists. But some people, when they hear this, might want to stand up and walk out of the room, and that's okay, actually. It's not for everybody. It's even stronger when you look at the genuine Buddhist renunciation, because you even renounce the this whole lifetime. You kind of look more towards future lifetimes than this lifetime, which is hard to understand if you don't believe in past and future lives or have never seen them. It's also really hard. Renunciation is also really hard if you've been through some very serious harm that was beyond your control, that it can feel very insulting to say that some genuine harm that came to you isn't the ultimate cause of your suffering. And that's okay too. Again, none of this is like required to uh, undergo this step of a spiritual path. Um, and so it's nice to say at this point, Buddhist philosophy isn't for everybody. It's quite courageous and quite powerful. And not everyone's ready for it, or certainly for the later stages of it right now. I think each of us has seen that too, and those of us who have been Buddhists for a long time, um, it takes a while, and you can also trick yourself and think you have are ready for something, and you aren't really. Like I was talking about how long it took to forgive my dad. It's kind of trite to say you have forgiven someone if you really haven't. Like, and if you can't, then you wait. Um, this topic relates very intimately to suffering. They're really almost like the same topic, right? Suffering and then renouncing it. Because if you understand suffering, you want to stop it. Um, so one of the most common stories told at this point is this story of the two arrows. There's a couple other stories with arrows with the Buddha. They had fewer types of objects back then, so you have to, everybody knew about arrows. They didn't have guns. And so they tell this story about two arrows. Probably a lot of you have heard this story. There's two arrows that strike you when something difficult happens to you. The first is the actual thing, getting sick or getting robbed or having a big financial problem or having your home bombed. These things happen. That's real suffering. You can't prevent that. The second one is the story we tell ourselves about it. Um, oh my God, why me? Who did this? What were they thinking? Like, this is so unjust. I don't deserve this. My life is ruined. I'm never going to get over this. I'm so angry. That kind of stuff. I think we know. I could go on, right? The stories. And I like giving some of those more serious answers, like your house bombed. Like it's pretty reasonable to be angry about that. Um, But the exaggerated kind of anger we were talking about earlier, where you project only harm, you don't see the cause and effect, you very deeply personalize things, take things personally. Um, I'll tell you how you can tell if the second arrow is at play, because the longer it is from the time the thing happened, often the worse you feel, which doesn't make any sense, right? You're getting further away from the events that happened, and yet you feel more angry. And I felt that way too. Um, so I think that's a good sign that the second arrow, the story you tell yourself about the problem. Um, and it's understandable too, like especially for things that happened to you as children, because as a child, it didn't feel good, but you also didn't quite understand that that wasn't something everybody went through. You didn't quite understand how bad it was. And like once I became a father, it seemed even worse. And what I experienced, because I could never imagine doing things like that as a father myself. But it's a story, it's a story that we each tell ourselves about the events of the past. And they really are gone, like where is the past? It's another one of these extraordinary meditations, very deep. And you don't have to come to an answer, but just to think about that. Like, is it a place? Is it a time? Does it exist at all? Like, did it ever exist? And I'm not saying that I know the answer to any of those questions, but it's very, very deep to think about even what the past is, because all I come to see is that it's a story in my mind, that it's and of course, like, something actually did happen, but it's very hard to know what actually happened. If you have a brother or sister, I think you have these experiences where there's a thing that happened together. Like me and my brother, there was a little store we used to go to in the beach town we lived. And I have a very distinct memory of us going to that store and then my brother stealing a bunch of beef jerky, like putting it down. I remember very vividly, like him putting it down his pants and then come out, then we enjoyed it. And I told my brother about it the other day. He's like, no, you stole the beef jerky. He's like, I remember it really clearly. You put it down your pants. So who's right? We only have two witnesses to that event. We didn't get caught. The store owner didn't know. I try to purify the negative karma of that event. Um, but which is true, right? And if you look at the neuroscience too of memory, they say when you remember something, it's more like, how medieval scribes worked, where they took a text and then they, like, that was, almost falling apart, and then they redrew it, or the Greek ones are even, actually the Greek ones are a better example, because in the times of, Greece and Rome, readers and writers were separate. Very few people knew how to read and write. There were scribes and there were readers. So, uh, yeah. So someone transcribing, like, the Bible, the Greek version of the Bible, um, might not know what those words meant. Actually, they're just like copying symbols. And so also, there weren't any spaces in the letters the way they wrote ancient Greek and Roman. So that's how some of they say that this you can have, like, no other gods before me. Like there may be one of the big mistakes in transcription, because without spacing, you kind of can't tell whether you can or can't believe in other gods as a Christian. Like, so you can interpret the earlier Greek scriptures saying that there actually are many gods, and this is just the one that you should listen to, or there aren't any other gods and it's just this one. We don't know, because the way that it's written. So anyway, it's kind of like that, the way your memory works, where you write something, you read it, but when you write it back, it's different. Like, as you remember something, it's not like a computer where it's stored there. They say the way human memory works is you take it out, but when you have to write it back in, and when you write it back in, it becomes a little bit different. I actually had this experience because I wrote a novel that's based on some of the things that happened in my family with Christian Science and things. But I spent so much time revising it, and it's fictional. But now the fictional versions of some of the things that happened to me have kind of overridden the ones that I knew that actually happened. So anyway, just it's worth looking into your own mind and seeing, how your stories change over time. Um, but anyway, the type of stories that really harm us are the ones like, poor me, I don't deserve that. Like, of course you didn't. Like, of course you don't deserve that. But it did happen. And you also don't deserve to be miserable ruminating about it for years later. Again, this gets a little bit sharper. This is none of this is saying anybody has to do these things. But when you get to the topic of renunciation, this is what it means. There's a book, I mentioned it before, the Gelug Kagyu Tradition of Mahamudra by Alexander Bertson. I know, not the, like, sexiest title, but I read that book over and over again. And especially, I really love the introduction to the book, which goes over the whole path. And there's a couple pages on renunciation in there I just read over and over again, trying to understand it, in the first years I was in Buddhism. And I have this nice quote from him. Once we reach the stage of renunciation, we're willing to sacrifice something. This does not refer to foregoing something trivial, like television or ice cream, or giving up something not at all trivial, like making love with our marriage partner, or even relaxing and having fun. We need to let go of our problems and all levels of their causes. I would just read that over and over again, like try. There's more. It's very nice, a couple of pages on renunciation. And so what are we renouncing? Anger, attachment, ignorance. But the Buddhist definitions of those that we've already been talking about. Um, Sujata, my friend I mentioned, when the Dalai Lama asked, has she been angry long enough? That's renunciation. That's how hard it is, I think. That's how real it is. And that's how beneficial it is. Like, look what happens to your life if you manage to renounce something far worse that happened to most of us. Uh, she became one of the most beneficial people on earth, because she was able to do that. It's so wonderful, so brave. That's with respect to renouncing anger. Anger doesn't feel good, like the gentleman said. So wouldn't it be? Don't we want to be free of it? With attachment, with respect to attachment, just imagine what it would feel like to enjoy pleasure without attachment. Or remember a time you did, if you have. Like, wasn't it better? Wasn't it better to not be like a junkie? Um, like wanting something. It's like then when you finally get it, it's like it doesn't even feel that good. Sometimes it doesn't feel good at all. You see it in movies. This is something movies are great for. Like, oh, if anybody has seen The White Lotus, anybody seen that show? So the guy that made the man, Mike White, who made that show, he's a Tibetan Buddhist. Very few people know this. He doesn't he kind of keeps it quiet, but he's a Tibetan Buddhist. I didn't know that, but I watched the first season and I was like, oh my God, this is like the most Buddhist show I've ever seen because it's all about the suffering of change. Like I've never seen captured in a movie so well people thinking they're having a good time and being miserable. Like his party scenes or sex scenes, they're just like, oh my God, you just see people totally swept. And I think we've all felt it too, right? But you see people totally swept away by their desire. Well, first of all, you see the miserable leading up to it, just in a beautiful place, spending tons of money, but miserable because there's some other thing they desperately want, these really wealthy people. And then they finally get it and they're miserable getting it. They're miserable getting it. So it is a little violent, it's a little sexual and stuff. I mean, but I find it amazing. My wife and I just watched the third season actually, which is actually super Buddhist. That one's actually takes place in Thailand, and you have, they're actually spending time going to a Buddhist monastery and so on. So yeah, yeah, there's a lot. I think now he has so much freedom that he just like, okay, I'm gonna just fill this thing with actual Buddhist imagery and um so I think there are really, really fantastic ways, to watch television and that show, it gives you an incredible insight into the suffering of change. What would it be like to enjoy pleasure without attachment? It's nice. I feel it sometimes. It's really nice. Just whatever comes your way, because many pleasures do come your way. How nice just to enjoy it. It might not repeat, but just to enjoy. Um, it's made my life not like I'm totally free of attachment, but I have less, and it's made so much of life nicer just to be relaxed. My wife really appreciates it. Um, and then to renounce ignorance. The ignorance, we talk about a lot of different forms of ignorance, but I like to just say like self-centeredness, is one of the core. I think one of the easiest ways to understand it is just I'm a little more important than everybody else, or I'm a little less important. But it's actually selfness. It's not a word in English, I don't think, but it's not selfishness as much as selfness. Just even believing there is a self there, which again, if I come back, we'll do those topics more in depth. Um, so feeling separate, or feeling a self that's more than we can actually justify, this exaggerated self that causes most of our pain. So in trying to cultivate renunciation, then we have a lot of conditioning to overcome. So much in our society. I mean, our society, I was just seeing this. It's an ad somewhere. You know, ads, they're just so insidious. Like you need this thing, you have to have this thing. Treat yourself, indulge, like indulge. Dude, any of you heard this? My mom used to say sinfulicious. Have you ever heard this word? It's like it's like we like doing things that are sort of bad. Sinfulicious is something that's delicious but bad for you. So there's a lot of in our society, also, but also evolution. There's a evolution itself has taught us um, some pretty bad lessons about violence and separateness. My daughter and I watched this great series called Our Planet 2. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's like it's sort of sad and ironic that the very best, most beautiful, high definition documentaries about nature are being made right now, just as we're, destroying more and more nature. Where it's like it's bizarre how both things like it's so beautiful and so clear, the imagery, and they'll go out for 2 or 3 years just to catch it, like a 30-second shot of a special thing. So we were watching this documentary, and there's this sad thing you keep seeing now because there's less ice in the Arctic of polar bears like swimming and swimming, like really skinny and hungry, like the mom and the baby polar bear swimming and swimming looking for food. Finally, they reach this cliffside where there's all these seagulls. And these are good lessons for my daughter and me too, watching these documentaries together. Because this polar bear like comes up, and if you watch any of these documentaries, the lions, the polar bears, the top of the pyramid, it's not a fair fight. They don't go after the strong deer or the strong seagulls. They go right to the little nests. So the polar bear goes right to the little seagull nest, and the mothers are screaming like, "Oh, don't eat my babies!" They eat the babies. Polar bears just sit there, and they are not sad about it. They don't have any feelings at all. Well, no, they feel good. They're finally getting some food, right? But they're just like, eating babies, like red blood all over their white fur. And that's like when I realized, like, wow, we evolved to eat babies, right? Us mammals, we're at the top of the heap. That is our conditioning. That is it within all of us. It's pretty extraordinary how far away from that we are as human beings now. Like almost nobody eats babies anymore. It's really, 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 really good. It's really good. But I don't know. I felt it really viscerally, and I'm glad my daughter knows too. It's that she's like, they're all the same. Every one of these documentaries, like they eat babies, and then the animals that are hurt. So it's pretty nice. It's amazing to be human. It's pretty mind blowing how we can go against millions of years, hundreds of millions of years of conditioning to just eat anything without caring about it and its life when we're hungry. We don't do that. None of us do that. What's that? Veal. Yeah. Veal lamb. Yeah. Pate. Um, so another approach to renunciation you may have heard is to renounce what they call the 8 worldly concerns. This is a very upsetting list when you first hear it. It's seeking gain, avoiding loss. You're like, what's wrong with that? Seeking pleasure, avoiding pain. Doesn't seem bad. Seeking praise and avoiding blame. That's probably the one I have the most problem with. Seeking fame and avoiding disgrace. What's wrong exactly with those 8 things? That's when I first heard them. What else is there? That kind of sums up my life. Um, and avoiding all those things doesn't sound like much fun. Um, but Mahayana Buddhism says you don't literally give these things up if you can do them without attachment or anger, which is a really big if, um, and with a motivation to generate genuinely benefit yourself and others. Um, but I think it's important to note, in this form of Buddhism, at least, it's different in like Theravada Buddhism, some other strains of Buddhism, where you do actually want to try to avoid um, all forms of pleasure. But that's not the case in Mahayana Buddhism. Your motivation is wishing to be free from suffering, not free from the world or free from relationships. So here's another one. Um, I talk a lot about media and television. I find a lot of inspiration there. So there was this Jerry Seinfeld special on Netflix called 23 Hours to Kill. I don't know if anyone ever saw that. And in this book, I actually wrote that I thought Jerry Seinfeld sums up the suffering of change better than His Holiness the Dalai Lama does. I thought it was so compelling. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama's office reviewed this whole book, and they didn't change that part. So I was like, oh, okay. There were a lot of things I thought because when they reviewed it, I was kind of nervous. But they did give me about 20 notes, but they were all in like this part, the end of the book, like very advanced aspects about emptiness. They thought, that's not quite right. You should do it this way. But this where I said, oh, Jerry Seinfeld is as good as His Holiness at teaching suffering of change. No problem. So I'll tell you why. So the whole show, I couldn't believe it. It was the same thing. I was watching it and said, oh my God, this whole show is about the suffering of change, which is the dissatisfaction we feel even with the things we call pleasures. And so he's amazing because he can just, I mean, they say, he makes jokes about nothing, which doesn't really, as we know from the beginning, there's no nothing, but they're about trivial things, very trivial, seemingly trivial things. So almost the whole comedy routine is about people coming to his show. That's almost all that he jokes about, and it's incredibly funny. And he does this long riff on how all the different sufferings of the people in the audience who came to the show. And he says, when you were at home before you came here, all you wanted to talk about was when you're going to leave. Then, when you're on the way there, you just want to get there. You're just like, when are we finally going to get there? And then once we get there, all we're talking about is when we need to go home, which I think we've all experienced that, right? Maybe you're experiencing it right now. When am I going to go home after this retreat? And so he climaxes this routine and he says, nobody wants to be anywhere. Nobody likes anything. We're cranky, we're irritable, and we're dealing with it by constantly changing locations. That is really brilliant. I'm sorry. That is better than many of the things I've heard His Holiness. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinarily accurate. So I love it. We we're dealing with it by constantly changing locations. Isn't that true? So anyway, if you do want to watch some show tonight, that's a good one. 23 Hours to Kill. It's really insightful. Um, some teachers, I forgot to mention this. Actually, I guess I mentioned it when I talk about love, but I used to get in trouble when I first was invited to lead meditations. Um, Wonderful nun uh, named Tenzin Choki scolded me because she said, you meditate on love too much. She said, you have to do the whole lamrim. It's important to give like equal attention to everything. And so now I do that. And I think that's the benefit of this book and this way of teaching. It's we don't skip anything. Many teachers I find do skip parts of the path, and in particular, renunciation. And they just go straight to compassion. It's like, oh, let's just go straight to compassion. That's the essence of it. Um, but the Lamrim says, like, you can't really practice compassion until you have all the foundations before it, especially renunciation, to have some sense of what suffering is and why you want to give it up and a wish to give it up. Um, Sometimes we're told, like, fake it till you make it, like and there's a lot of wisdom to that. Because some people say, better to be a sincere jerk than kind of fake nice person. So there's something to do that. Just some truth to that. But I also if anyone knows Lauren Ladner, I think people know Lauren Ladner. Yeah, he was very close. He is very close to Gyumen Khyentse Rinpoche. He's a teacher and helped establish the Greece Maja Center. And I talked to him about this because he's a psychotherapist too. And because there are times we pretend we're compassionate. So it's one thing to be making an effort to be compassionate, but behind it, you're like, oh yeah, I guess I'm a little selfish. But fake compassion is where you pretend you're compassionate, but you're not really compassionate. You just make the motions. And he said, I love this. Fake compassion is narcissism. I really like that. I think about this a lot. That real compassion needs a grounding in all these earlier stages of the path to be authentic. So, what's the alternative to renunciation? What if you don't want to do it? Um, what I find is it's self-deception. And it goes back to this movie, The Matrix, because there's a character named Cypher um, in The Matrix. All the names are very strong too, because Cypher kind of means like zero, or you can project whatever you want onto it. So Cypher wants to go back. He doesn't like the reality of the real world. He wants to go back to virtual sex, virtual stakes. Like he's like, fine, I know, whatever, they're illusions, but I prefer them to this reality. And so for us, the illusion that we embrace instead is externalizing our problems and pleasures. That's the stake in sex. It's blaming our problems, or projecting our pleasures onto external objects, and blaming our problems on external objects and situations. Endlessly blaming, chasing outside ourselves. And I'm not saying this as someone who's fully achieved this, obviously, um, but at least at least I've have some doubt, some doubt. So think about the people in your life, who uh, tend to externalize their problems versus take responsibilities for them. You look in the news is a nice place to actually, that's even better. You can think in your life or think in the news, people who are blaming their problems um, on other things. It is not very difficult to come up with certain people, both in your own life and in the public life. And then think about people who take responsibility for themselves. Take full responsibility. Even though difficult things happen, it's like, okay, whatever I can do to lead a happy life. Which ones are happier? The ones who are blaming on the outside, or the ones who are taking responsibility? And then that's where it comes back to that Shantideva quote. You can pave the world with leather, or you can put on a pair of shoes. And that's what renunciation is, kind of pair of shoes. It'd be a good brand for shoes put on the side. Although, maybe better if it's not leather, like a vegan leather or something like that. You can pave the world with vinyl or put on a pair of vegan shoes. Not as catchy. All right. So let's do the meditation on renunciation. So we're still in meditation session that we began at the start. But if you like, refresh your motivation. Why have you stuck out this retreat? Why are you here? What are you trying to cultivate and abandon in your own mind, your own life? What would be the result of doing so? And what are some good examples in the world we can look to give us inspiration? And then bring your mind to your breath, whatever way you've already been doing. And again, we'll just focus on our breath for 1 minute. ease into the meditation on renunciation. So, meditating on renunciation means two things: understanding how the causes of suffering lie in our own delusions of attachment, anger, and ignorance, and then turning away from craving and blaming things outside yourself to find a reliable source of refuge within your own mind. This meditation begins reflecting again on life's unmistakable difficulties, pain, poverty, homelessness, sickness, violence, abuse, exploitation, conflict, loneliness, aging, and death. There's a lot of suffering in the world we can't avoid. And then also think how even when we're free from ordinary suffering, we can still feel dissatisfied with life's pleasures because relationships and objects and experiences don't last. They wear out, they otherwise come to an end. Your mind can also change. See if you can remember a time that you stopped enjoying something that you'd enjoyed only days before, like an activity or a person, some type of food, or a type of work. And sometimes this happens simply from getting too much of it. And then remember that you'll eventually meet your death and lose everything, a fate that none of us can avoid. So even though there's no way to rid yourself of life's difficult experiences, there is a way to be free of the mental side of suffering. So let's see if we can honestly appraise our own minds right now by looking into our delusions. With each one, we'll try to understand better how it causes suffering and how its way of seeing is exaggerated. So, attachment is a delusion that exaggerates the positive in whatever we desire. So, imagine something specific that you feel a strong attachment to: a person, a thing, an activity, an achievement. And now ask yourself if your mind is biased in how it sees that person or thing. Do you ignore the drawbacks of what you want? For a moment, try to think of all the ways in which your object of attachment is flawed. Is it perfect, or does it come with its own problems? Will it truly bring lasting happiness on its own? So next, bring to mind an object of your anger, which is usually a person. It can be someone from your everyday life or someone famous, like a politician. Notice how anger exaggerates that person's negative qualities, how hard it is to see any good. Try to recognize that many people love this person: relatives, friends, admirers. And try to see how this person's actions may benefit many other people too. Then look at ignorance, the root of the other delusions. Do you tend to exaggerate your own problems and minimize those of others? Do you believe that you're just a little bit more important than everyone else, or less? What would it be like to see every person as equally deserving of happiness, health, security, wealth? So even though you might logically believe this, try for a moment to truly feel it. Imagine the mental peace that comes from feeling that others are equally important to you, even your enemies. So now consider whether you're ready to let go of the delusions that cause you to suffer. Do you have the courage to admit that external pleasures, relationships, and achievements aren't the ultimate source of happiness? Is it possible to walk that tightrope of being fully engaged in life without feeling addicted to some people and things and repulsed by others? Seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, seeking gain, avoiding loss, seeking praise, avoiding blame, seeking fame, avoiding disgrace. Imagine not running away from these, but renouncing their hold on you. Imagine using life's impermanent pleasures and pains only to deepen your connections to others and do good in the world. Renunciation doesn't mean that you have to let go of your goals, your relationships, your possessions, or pleasures. But are you ready to let go of believing that they are the source of your happiness and irritation? Are you ready to commit to an inward journey of discovery to understand how your mind really works and what your mind truly is? Could happiness be as simple as accepting and then gently letting go of those troubling aspects of your personality, like worry and anxiety, to discover a happier, more stable way to live? Is it possible that we each have within us a profound well of warmth and stability and goodness and satisfaction that doesn't rely on anything outside ourselves? Let's see if we can touch that part of our minds right now. Start by taking a couple of breaths and giving them all your attention. And now let anything at all appear in your mind. Let thoughts arise and disappear on their own without getting attached to them. or annoyed by them. Try to watch your thoughts from a distance while letting your mind stay at peace. And then see if you can explore a subtler level of awareness. When the mind looks beneath thoughts to awareness itself, what does it see? So without any expectations, let's watch our minds quietly for a moment. Awareness itself. You might find that the corners of your mouth tip up into a smile as you find a stable, unending source of happiness deep within yourself. aspire that the insights we gained from this meditation might enable us to better understand the delusions that cause our dissatisfaction. We can dedicate ourselves to seeing the drawbacks and benefits of objects, people, relationships, and experiences more clearly than before. And set an intention to carry the good habits we built in this meditation into our day and our week, so they change how we see people and experiences and how we react. Determine to remain in control of your mind so you can choose how to respond to life's urges, following them when they're beneficial, or when they aren't, allowing them to melt back into the open spaciousness of that more subtle mind that's always there for us as a refuge. And you can come out of the meditation. Any questions on renunciation? Everybody figured it out? If you did, please tell me. Yeah, the microphone. Oh, whatever. Anything. It's the end of our retreat. So any questions relating to any topic?
Well, I guess what's coming up for me is that I'm having some anticipatory anxiety, like I'm not going to be able to handle this. So that's a delusion, correct?
Well, handle what?
Um, Parents passing, just loved ones, passing
Yeah.
on, and just things going on in my own home life and what
Yeah.
have you, stress and so forth. Other people, the other family members are incurring stress, which in turn affects me because we're
Yeah.
all connected, right? So,
Yeah. That's reasonable. Well, I
I
mean,
don't know if this even, yeah.
oh, it's very relevant. And I think we all feel that. I mean, I do have to say, like, okay, so we're finishing a retreat. Something Ben Rene once said to us is that if you do a 1 week retreat, you should have a 1 week vacation, either before or after. It's not easy doing what we are doing, what we just did. It can be very frustrating, isn't it, when you talk to friends about coming back from a retreat. I did some long retreats lately. I did like a 2 week retreat, 3 week retreat, 1 month retreat. I come back, people say, "Oh, you must be so relaxed. That must be so nice." Like, it was amazing, but it was very hard. Like, in some ways, like I did a 3 week retreat at home, and it was kind of the hardest thing I ever did, and also like the greatest thing you ever did. So I think that balance is really important. Like, the level of like hedonic, like sensual care you need to treat yourself with is kind of equal to the spiritual care. Like, we need both. We have bodies, we're not, we live in a material world, right? Despite what Christian scientists say. Um, so I think taking care of yourself, like both mentally and physically, is so critical. There's no way you can handle all of that stress without taking some time to yourself and doing things you really enjoy. And What we're doing now is growth. Like it's that middle, it's like between panic and comfort is growth. That's what we've done for 3 days together. It's growth. It's a little bit, I don't, maybe we went a little bit of panic sometimes, but you want to be in comfort. You need some time in comfort. So you really do need to relax and go for walks and eat and drink things you enjoy and watch shows if you like that, or play music, go to music, see friends. That's like the number one for, we all need like nourishing social interactions, although maybe we got some of those this weekend. I did, meeting you, talking to all of you. So I think that's self-compassion. Like that's the more literal type of self-compassion that we all need, and you need a lot of it all the time. Like before I did this second session, I just took like a 30-minute nap or 40-minute nap. That's I need. And that, I mean, does anybody, it's there's few things more pleasurable, I think, sometimes than a nap. When you really need one, it just feels so great. And I think taking a nap in the middle of the day is really a delightful thing to do. And taking baths or hot tubs, if you have a hot tub, go for a swim. Whatever it is you enjoy, you know, I think it's important to do every day those things. You really, I mean, because it's a bit odd. Like, why would you have this aspiration? Which, again, if I come back, we'll talk about like the bodhisattva. Like, this is so hard right here up to renunciation. Then the rest is actually like kind of really fun and cool, like love, compassion, um, emptiness, interdependence. Like, it's really sort of fun doing. This is hard. Um, but yeah, I think you really, really got to take care. People are often kind of surprised at how like when my wife, the other day, she stayed home with me. Like she saw me go through my whole day, and she's continually kind of surprised because I get a lot done. I'm a very, very productive person, but I fool around a lot. Like in the morning, like I play music now. I started playing my flute again. You played the flute too, right? So I started, now I'll practice like for a half an hour or an hour in the morning. I don't know what I used to do at that time. I was like emailing, going right into work. It's so much nicer. I love that. And it's pleasurable. If you think about it in the right way, it also is a spiritual practice. It's very beautiful. But it's beautiful and it's pleasurable. And like we want to do those things for ourselves, whatever they are, the really nourishing ones. And then my wife's surprised because I'll take like a really long lunch sometimes, like 90 minutes, like not always, but a lot actually. I'll take lunch and I'll kind of sit around, and sometimes I'll watch something or read, or then I'll take a big nap. But honestly, like I've always done this. Like I really rejected the 80-hour week. Like when I looked, even in college, when I looked at people, I saw they were wasting most of those 80 hours. A lot of it was just fooling around and distraction. And I was like, I can get my work done in 40, 30, maybe even 20 hours a week, actually, with focus, and then do fun things the rest of the time. So reading is something I really love. And not, it's wonderful to read Dharma, but it's also really, really nourishing, I find, to read lots of other things, you know, um, nonfiction and science fiction. I've always really loved. Like science fiction is like the one genre that a lot of people don't read science fiction at all. They're like, oh, that's like trash. It's the only genre that is concerned with what if. How could our world be different? What an extraordinary genre. Like every other genre is concerned with how the world is. There's one genre, science fiction, fantasy, that is concerned with what are the infinite other ways that the world could be. Star Trek's nice. That's one where it's like this utopian world where the whole Earth's at peace, but then we seem to be fighting the Romulans and stuff like that. But yeah, I think reading is very nice, and there are like trashy television shows that are a waste of time, but there's many really, really. I quoted like a dozen or something, right? Like there's so much to gain from great works of art. Like the best television shows and movies are great works of art, like Dickens or anything else. Um, what other things to enjoy? Well, exercise and physical things, yoga. Um, so I think that, yeah, you're not going to get anywhere without taking care of yourself. You need like equal time. And sadly, a lot of us don't have that time, or our work doesn't allow for it. Or so, I'm so sorry. I remember the first time I ever left the country, I went to Egypt with my friend and his mother. It's like a long story. But I met this guy, this Egyptian guy. He told me about his life. We were out, they were like some relatives of the people we were with. And we were out and I was just talking to him about his life. And he's telling me about his jobs. He's like, I have 3 jobs. I'm like, how long is each one? 8 hours. Like, and he explained. And I'm like, but that's all the time. That's like the 24 hours in the whole day. You do this job, this job, this job. It's like, when do you sleep? Like, I don't sleep. You're just always working. You're just always working. So sadly, actually, I think a lot of the world is like worse than we have it. But still, a lot of us have it like that too, where there's just like no moment. So yeah, if your life is like that, I'm so sorry. But if you can, try to find the time to relax and really nourish yourself in the hedonic ways, in the physical ways that are healthy. You don't want to eat 3 donuts like I did in college and realized that was not a good way to relax. um, but there's many other healthy things you can do, including eating nice meals and beautiful. My wife's father is like that. He's a real gourmand. I said, really loves eating. But it's funny because he eats very well in very small portions. Like he make this very, very beautiful breakfast, just one little piece of toast, like half almond butter, avocado with little seasonings on it. So I think treating all the pleasures you enjoy in life like rituals is very, very important. Being like ritualistic about how you take care of yourself and living a clean life, having a clean, beautiful environment and treating the things you do with dignity and ritual. And if you're involved in Buddhism, there's mental things you can do to transform whatever you do into a spiritual practice. Um, but like I said, if I come back, we'll talk more about those things. But yeah, in terms of like finding the energy to do hard stuff, you need to really know your boundaries and nourish yourself. I took care of my grandpa um, for a long time, for years, because he was such a jerk to my dad. This was the other thing I forgot to mention. That's the other thing I saw about my dad is I saw his dad beat him. His dad beat his wife. His dad beat his brother. His brother beat him. He lived in New York City and was like West Side Story, literally. That's where they lived. And when he'd go to school, then he'd get beat up by those gangs, like you saw in West Side. It was really like that. So he's beat up by everybody in his whole life. So it's kind of amazing he only beat me up like a dozen times or something like that. Like that's pretty good. Like good. And then I'm at zero. I never beat anybody up. Hey, so it's going in the right direction with the snibbies. Um, but my grandfather, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I took care of him. So his kids didn't have anything to do with him because he was such a jerk, and his wife committed suicide too, like very just awful. Um, so I took care of him, and I had him in a nursing home just a couple blocks from my house in San Francisco. And honestly, it got really hard. I was in my 20s, and I didn't resent anybody for it, but it was hard, and I didn't want to go visit him all the time. And I did feel guilty about that. Um, but I kind of accepted like I need my boundaries, like actually, and I need to nourish myself, and I need to just sit on, like, go to yoga on Saturday and have a nice lunch, and just sit on the couch for a couple hours and just space out. I actually like just spacing out, which I kind of realized was kind of early meditation before I was a Buddhist. Just sitting there like, oh, it's just nice to be. Um, and I just kind of accepted that, like, hey, I really kind of only have the energy to go visit my grandpa once a week, but we'll make it really good. I'll go for like 4 hours. We'll go anywhere he wants to go for dinner. He always wanted lobster, and it's kind of hard to get lobster. There aren't lobsters in San Francisco. So then I'd have to find a place. For a while, we're going to Red Lobster, which is quite bad. Um, and then I found a place in Fisherman's Wharf, but it was so hard. Like, caring for um, an aging parent or person is really hard. I mean, we would cross, like I would help him in the bathroom. He was getting help from other people all day long. It really made me appreciate that. But then I would have to help him in the bathroom. That could take like 45 minutes, just going to the bathroom. I think some of you know what's involved. Like it's a big production helping someone who can't take care of themselves. So yeah, it was hard, but so yeah, I think you do need your boundaries. Like because otherwise you'll explode, it's just going to explode and you'll get angry at people or you start chasing addictions. So you've got to take care of yourself and respect your own boundaries. And he loved it. He really enjoyed the end of his life, and I felt proud of how I took care of him. I did the best I could. And I guess in some abstract sense, like, okay, I wish I went every day to see him. Like, what does it even mean to say something like that? Because I couldn't. Like, that was how much I could take care of him. I was at a busy life. I had work. I was a young guy in my 20s. I had family, friends, trying to build relationships, and that was how much time and energy I had, and being able to still take care of myself. So I think understanding your boundaries and not feeling guilty for it and taking care of yourself is really, really important. So I'm glad you asked that because we didn't talk as much about those ordinary ways of taking care of yourself. But even Venerable Renee, who's like the greatest yogi I know, he says, you know, vacation at the same amount of time as your retreat. Like, if he says it, it's got to be true. I mean, look at it. He's the most successful yogi I know. Um, so yeah, that's helpful. I hope. We feel guilty. We feel guilty for taking care of ourselves. Like, you want to treat yourself like your own best friend. Like, what if, and again, that's part of the next meditations. But what would you say to yourself if you were going on a walk with yourself? That's a good way if once you don't have someone else to ask yourself. But imagine you're going for a walk with yourself and yourself is telling you your problems. Like, oh, I can't deal with this. Like, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Like, how do I manage this? Like, I'm taking care of this person. They don't even appreciate it. What would you say if your friend told that to you? What would you say to them? And you just say it to yourself. It's like, oh my God, you're doing such a great job. You're already a saint. I couldn't do what you're doing. That's unbelievable. Like, keep it up, but take care of yourself. Let's go do something nice right now. What do you enjoy? Let's go do what you enjoy for 2 hours. I want to take care of you. Say that to yourself, right? It's really important. So, and the Greek word for that is hedonic. It's kind of cool. The Greek had all these words for happiness. They must have had a cool culture in ancient Greece. They had all these words for the different types of happiness. Pretty cool. There are very few times on earth we've had those moments of like democracy and free thinking, like total openness to critical inquiry, like we just want to know what's true and right. Like, don't worry if it contradicts what the leaders say. Maybe only been like 3 times that's happened on earth that we know of, like ancient Greece, the Renaissance in Italy. It didn't last very long. And now the Western Enlightenment that everyone's so down on, Western civilization has its problems, but they didn't have democracy in Tibet or in Thailand or anywhere else, the Middle East. It's a very fortunate time and very fragile. And so hopefully our civilization will continue so that we get all those words for happiness. We do have them because they say the English language is um, promiscuous. I like that. They say the English language is promiscuous because it will just absorb all the other words from other languages. So we do actually have all those words for happiness now. And even mudita, the sympathetic joy, the rejoicing that we did. Now we absorb those ideas into English of that rejoicing is another way to be happy. Thanks for asking that. That's kind of a long discussion, but I think a really important one. Thanks for asking so many good questions. I really appreciate that. It makes the whole event a lot richer. Any other questions or comments? I wish you had your flute here and we could do a little closing tune for the whole. Somebody did that at a retreat I was at in January. That was so beautiful. Oh, oh, oh yeah. You know, it's the oldest instrument that we know of. It's like this ancient, ancient instrument, and they found one near those French caves in the south of France, and it had our same scales on it. You know, like a pentatonic scale. It kind of makes you tingle thinking about that. Like, wow, 30,000 years ago, the same instrument, the same notes. It's a way to connect with our ancestors and our humanity, particularly with that instrument, the flute, because it's the oldest instrument we know of. So, oh yeah. Oh, really? Oh, oh wow. Oh, oh. I would like, I don't know if people heard, but I also play the flute, probably not as well. Um, but I play the flute too and really enjoy that as a pleasurable activity. So, yeah, if it's on Zoom or something or recorded, let me know. I'd love to watch it. Any other comments or questions or performances? Okay. Well, then maybe we end a little early. That's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of material. It's so powerful. Um, I really like feeling it that at that speed because you don't lose the plot, right? You see the connections between all the different parts. So, and if you're, fully Buddhist, then you can augment it with what you understand about the full lamrim, like Lama Tsongkhapa's lamrim. But yeah, well then why don't we just dedicate? This was a very beneficial activity. However, imperfect. My own delivery. Um, we all really made an enormous amount of progress in our minds just by thinking about these topics and how they're renewed and adapt into our modern culture, modern belief systems or lack of belief systems. And if we're Buddhist, maybe we learn some better ways of explaining the Dharma to our friends that don't freak them out as much, which is kind of useful. Or also, fresh ways of looking at the ancient topics in, the lower scopes of the lamrim, lower and middle scopes of the lamrim. Uh, so may whatever, think for a moment actually of, one or two things that most resonated with you. Let's just spend 1 minute doing that actually. That's actually something Venerable Renee taught me too. Yeah, just think about one or two things that resonated. And if you have a little notepad, you can write them down or just remember them. So just for a minute, think, like, what was it that really resonated in these last 3 days? And then we could aspire that whatever did resonate with us carries out into our lives, especially with the challenges, whatever challenges we're facing in our mind, in our relationships, our livelihood, body. Some of these ideas carry into ways of meeting those challenges with renewed energy, maybe even joy. When you start to learn the toolkit of how to deal with problems, there's a little part of you that even is excited when a problem comes up because you say, oh, now I can test that out. Now I can think about impermanence, or refuge, cause and effect, renunciation. Firefighters, none of them would ever wish for anyone's home to burst into flames. But I think they get a little excited when the bell rings because they've been waiting around for days and then finally they can go apply their skills in helping people, saving people, preventing loss of property, life. I think that's what it is to practice this path is you're ready and even a little bit excited to try to help yourself and others. So yeah, whatever merits that we've created by practicing together become the causes for our own happiness, the happiness of everyone we touch, deeper, more fulfilling relationships, and whatever we can possibly do to make a better, more harmonious, peaceful, healthy world. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I love visiting here. It's such a beautiful sangha, beautiful place, beautiful community, beautiful walks.